You're not just a human being, you are art.
So let's start our discussion with this Bible verse. But Jesus beheld their thoughts and said unto them, with men this is impossible. But if they will forsake all things for my sake, with God whatsoever things I speak are possible. So meaning, lahat ng ginagawa natin, as long na kasama natin si God, is walang imposible. Kaya patuloy lang tayo maniwala at magtiwala. Kasi walang imposible as long na kasama natin siya. So, hindi ko alam kung anong oras niyo pinapanood ngayon to, pero I just want to say, good morning, good morning, good morning. Bakit good morning? Para energetic tayong lahat, diba? So, a pleasant day to each and everyone. Sana ay nakakain at nakainom na ng sapat na tubig ang lahat. So, as you can see sa screen ng bawat isa sa atin is may nakalagay na have a wonderful day today. Meaning, let's start our day with a positive mind. Alam, magbusit, di ba? Huwag muna kayong pa-stress masyado. So, there's a saying in Kapampangan na, alam magbusit, bantang ali ka maglupang pusit. In Tagalog, huwag ka daw magbusit para hindi ka magmukhang pusit. Wala, it's just pauso lang dito sa amin. So, ayun, have a wonderful day today. So, before tayo mag-start, syempre ipapakilala ko muna sarili ko, diba? Alang-alang naman na dada ako ng dada dito nang hindi nyo ako kilala. So, I am Princess Terla. Single po, single as lamang po. And I am the assigned reporter for the topic Urban Patterns, Key Issue number 3 and Key Issue number 4. Before we proceed to our main topic is, meron muna akong inihandang motivation or simple icebreaker para magkaroon tayo ng idea sa lesson natin ngayon, diba? It is entitled, Sing and Guess Me. Ang kaso, it's just a video recording, so hindi kayo makakakanta, diba? So, the new mechanics is, all you need to do is, you need to type the first letter of the name of your crush, and then after nun, your answer. So, ayun. I'll give you 15 seconds para i-comment yung answer and then the first name or the first letter of the name of your crush. I'll give you 15 seconds. So, are you ready? So, without further ado, let's start! So, our topic for today is about urban patterns. Bali, continuation lang ito ng report ni Mr. Cyrus. And I will be going to discuss the key issue number 3, which is why do inner cities face distinctive challenges? And key issue number 4, why do suburbs face distinctive challenges? So, without further ado, let's start. So let's start with the key issue number 3, which is why do inner cities face distinctive challenges? So we will tackle it later kung bakit nga ba. Let us know first on what is inner city na tinutukoy dito. What is inner city? So inner city refers to the areas in or near the center of a large city where people live and where there are often problems. So, here in inner city, usually, yung mga low incomes, yung mga nakatira dito. That's why they always face a problem. People are poor and there are few jobs and bad houses. So, inner city kasi is a older part of a city wherein
old factories are here and it is densely populated. Para ma-visualize nyo kung ano tong inner city na tinutukoy ko, here are the characteristics. Inner city are high-density housing. It is mainly private or rented. And front doors opening onto the street wherein pag open mo ng door nyo, is straight na kaagad yung bubungad sa'yo. There's no garden or garage. So if you have a car, you will park it on the street. No choice ka kasi there's no garden. Wala kang garden or wala kang garage para i-park yun. So if you have a car, you will park it on the street. In inner city, there are a lot of problems that they face. Like there are physical problems, there are social problems, and economic problems. So ayan, that's what inner city looks like. Kung napapansin nyo, yung sinabi ko kaninang characteristic wherein pag open mo ng door mo is straight na kaagad. And yung mga car nila is nakapark lang sa street. Let's proceed muna to the physical issues that the inner city is facing. So, here are the usual problems that they face when it comes in physical issue of the inner city. The first one is deteriorated housing or process of deterioration. The second one is the urban renewal wherein nakapaloob dito yung public housing and the renovated housing. So we will tackle it one by one. The first physical issue in inner city is deteriorated housing or process of deterioration. So what is this? So the house there are in poor condition. In short, luma na. So the process of deterioration is that as the number of low-income residents increase in the city, the territory they occupy expands. Well, it is true because as time passes by, mas lalong dumadami yung mga low-income residents. A lot of people is nawawalan ng trabaho, especially now that we are experiencing this kind of pandemic. Maraming nawalan ng trabaho, di ba? So, how their territory expands? Di ba sabi ko kanina that as the number of low-income residents increase in the city, the territory they occupy expands. So, paano? So, by means of these, middle-class families move out of a neighborhood to newer housing farther from the center and sell or rent their houses to lower-income families. So, by means of this, the territory they occupy expands as long that there are middle-class families moving out farther from the center. So, the low-income families, they are going to rent the house or they are going to buy it. So, there are two processes of deterioration. The first one is filtering. Here in filtering, large houses built by wealthy families in the 19th century are subdivided by landlords into smaller dwellings for low-income families. So, this process of subdivision of houses and occupancy of successive waves of lower-income people is called filtering. So, the better house is maintained, the longer it will last. So, it's like the large houses from the wealthy family is that the landlord will subdivide the house and then ipaparent to sa mga low-income families. If, sabi dun sa reference, if the rent that the landlords collected are less than the cost of taxes or maintenance cost, the landlord will stop maintaining the house and they will abandon the property. So, if inabandon na, it will lead to deteriorated housing. So that is the first process of deterioration. The second process of deterioration is the redlining. So, redlining is drawing lines on a map to identify areas in which they will refuse to loan money. So, redlining is actually a discriminatory practice of denying services. Some banks engage in not loaning money to certain inner city areas. So, it's like discrimination to other, to other people. So, as a result of redlining, families who try to fix up houses in their area have difficulty borrowing money. That's why low-income families have problems in revitalizing their house, wherein it can also lead to deteriorated housing if they will not fix that house. So let's proceed to the second physical issue that the inner city face, which is the urban renewal. So, urban renewal is that cities identify blighted inner city neighborhood, acquire the properties from private owners, relocate the residents and businesses, clear the site, and build new roads and utilities. The land is then turned over to private developers or to public agencies, such as the Board of Education or the Parks Department, to construct new buildings or services. So in short, urban renewal is a process of knocking down and rebuilding entire city areas, wherein it is often purchased by private developers or public agencies. In urban renewal, national government grants help cities pay for this process, wherein this process was criticized for destroying low-income housing and displacing people or reducing it as a low-cost housing. So here in urban renewal, there are two bullets here. The first one is public housing and the second one is renovated housing. So we will tackle it one by one. The first one is public housing. It is a housing authority established by the local government, manages buildings, and federal governments pays the cost of construction and the maintenance, repair, and management that are not covered by rent. So, this public housing was established to provide decent and safe rental housing for eligible low-income families. And it is only reserved for low-income households who must pay 30% of their income for rent. So meaning, it is only for low-income households. Hindi pwedeng maki-join yung mga nasa middle class or high class. And sabi dito, they must pay 30% of their income for rent. So, for example, in a month, your family's income is 5,000. And then, meaning, the 30% of 5,000 is for the rent. It's okay na. Kasi, in public housing, you are safe compared to other rented houses, diba? So, actually, in Britain, public housing is declined by the government. They force local authorities to sell some of their dwellings to the residents. So, yung tinutukoy na dwellings dito is where someone lives, like houses, apartments, and condos. So, imbes na daw mag-provide ng public housing yung government, parang sinabihan pa ng government yung mga local authorities na they will just sell some of their dwellings to the residents. Wherein, for them siguro, mas maganda yon kesa sa public housing. But, for me, mas okay na yung public housing kesa doon sa magsisell pa ng or magsisell pa yung mga local authorities. Kasi in public housing, you feel safe, diba? The second one is renovated housing, wherein renovating the house is the alternative way to demolishing deteriorated inner city houses. So, it is much better. Kasi imbes nga naman na i-demolish, why not i-renovate na lang? So, yung sinasabi kong deteriorated ngayon is yun din, or example nito is yung sinabi ko kanina, wherein if the landlords abandon the place or abandon the properties, it can lead to deteriorated houses and pwedeng i-demolish yun. So, non-profit organization renovate house and sell or rent them to low-income people. So, there's a non-profit organization pala na nagpapa-renovate ng deteriorated houses and then ipapa-rent nila. So, it is actually a good idea because yung nagastos mo or yung nagastos nila sa pagpapa-renovate is pwedeng mabawi by means of renting or selling the renovated house. So, renovated housing attracts middle-class people. Paano to? Deteriorated lang naman. It attracts people pa din or middle-class people pa. So, bakit? So, it's because the houses may be larger, more substantially constructed, yet cheaper in the inner city compared to suburbs. It is true nga naman, diba? You just need to renovate and then after nun, bongga na yung house mo. Ang kaso, sabi dun sa reference, it is expensive when renovate inner city house compared in buying a new one in the suburbs. But for the middle class people siguro, okay lang na expensive yung pagpaparenovate as long na maganda yung kinalalabasan. So, the process by which middle-class people move into deteriorated inner city houses and they renovate them is called gentrification. Yun yung tawag dun sa mga middle-class people na nag-move to deteriorated houses and then they will renovate the house. Let's proceed to the inner city social issues. So, there are two problems here, which are the underclass and culture of poverty. Let's start with underclass. Underclass are the inner city residents because they are trapped in an unending cycle of poverty and social issues from high unemployment, alcoholism, drug addiction, deteriorating school system, lack of police and fire personnel, and etc. Siguro nakasanayan na nila lahat ng mga social issues na yun Some of the underclass are homeless, wherein we all know that homelessness have been sparked by family problems, job loss, or mental illness. Yes, totoo yun. Na alam naman natin or madami tayong nakakita ng mga tao na pakalat-kalat sa street, natutulog sa street, and usually, yung mga yun is meron silang mental illness. So, they are underclass pala. They are considered as underclass. Wherein homelessness is a serious problem is a serious problem in LDCs or less developed countries. Mahirap siyang solusyonan. Oo. Especially to those LDCs. So, in inner city, they are lack of technical skills needed for most jobs. That's why, maraming walang trabaho. Kasi they are lack of technical skills needed. That's why they are in the underclass. The second one is culture of poverty. Wherein inner city residents are trapped as a permanent underclass because they live in a culture of poverty. Some inner city residents turn to drugs. Some drug users obtain money through criminal activities. They form gangs to control lucrative drugs distribution. And violence erupts when two gangs fight over the boundaries between their drug distribution area. Kung mapapansin nyo, it's like a domino effect, di ba? It's like they are trapped in an hopeless environment. Parang may nakaharang na sa kanila. Kaya ayon, nakasanayan na nila, lagi na nilang ginagawa yon, and hindi na nila makontrol. For them, hindi masama yon, pero for us, sobrang sama ng ginagawa nila, diba? They distribute drugs, they form gangs, ganun ba? So again, inner city residents are trapped as a permanent underclass because they live in a culture of poverty. So let's proceed to the inner city economic issues. So the concentration of low-income residents in inner city neighborhoods of central cities has produced financial problems. So here are the two economic problems that the inner city face. The first one is the eroding tax base, and the second one is the impact of recession. So the first one is eroding tax base, wherein low-income inner city residents require public services, but they can pay very little of the taxes necessary to support those services. So, inner city residences can only pay very little in taxes due to their low incomes. In central cities, they face a growing gap between the cost of needed services and the availability of funds to pay for them. So, there are two choices to close the gap na sinasabi dito between the cost needed services and the availability of funds to pay for them. Here are they. The first one is to reduce services, and the second one is to raise tax revenues. The first one is reduce services. So, merong nakalagay na example dito. The first one is to close libraries, eliminates bus routes, collect trash less frequently, delay replacement of outdated school equipment. So, by means of these services, it can close the gap between the cost needed service and the availability of funds to pay for them. So, cutbacks in public services also encourage middle-class residents and industries to move from the city. The second choice is to raise tax revenues. So, here in raise tax revenues, they spend public money to increase CBD, wherein CBD stands for Central Business District. So, example of this is that they provide tax breaks for downtown offices, luxury hotels, restaurants, and shops. So, these businesses pay more taxes than the buildings demolished to make way for them, and they provide minimum wage public services for low-income inner cities residents. So, these businesses pala is that they provide more jobs and outreach services. But spending public money to increase the downtown tax base can scarce funds away from projects in inner city neighborhoods like subsidized housing and playgrounds. So, those are the two choices of the city in closing the gap between the cost of needed services and availability of funds to pay for them. So, that economic problem pala is there is a choice to close the gap to the eroding tax base, diba? Next economic problem that the inner city face is the impact of recession. But first, what is recession muna? So, recession falls in national income wherein It is characterized by high unemployment, falling average incomes, increase in inequality, and higher government borrowing. So dito, dahil na din wala silang trabaho, mababa yung sweldo nila or yung sahod nila, magli-lead yun sa pag-utang or pag-borrow ng money sa government. So to purchase a house, most people borrow money through a mortgage, which is repaid in monthly installment over many years. So, mortgage is a loan used to purchase or maintain a home or other real estate. So, meron silang tinatawag na subprime mortgage. Subprime mortgage, wherein when someone buys a house, despite of having poor credit histories and a first-time home buyers was approved for mortgage without background check. So, this subprime mortgage is for the borrowers with poor, incomplete, or non-existent credit histories. Parang hindi sila natatakot na pautangin sila, diba? What if takbuhan sila? What if taguan sila, hindi na sila magbayad, diba? So, hindi mangyayari yun because meron silang tinatawag na foreclosure. Foreclosure. Sana all my closure. Char. Foreclosure is when people are unable to repay their loans. Lenders can take over the property wherein the lender can force a sale of the home to pay for the outstanding loan. So, walang mangyayaring takbuhan, walang mangyayaring taguan. Ang gagawin ni lender is kukuhanin niya yung house. It's like maglalagay yung lender ng tarpaulin dun sa property and then nakalagay doon is foreclosure and for sale sa ilalim. Imagine nyo na lang or imagine nyo na lang, diba? Basta yun, walang takbuhan na mangyayari because meron silang foreclosure na tinatawag. We are already done to the key issue number 3. So let's proceed to the key issue number 4, which is why do suburbs face distinctive challenges? But first, what is suburbs or suburbs or whatsoever? So, suburbs is a word that refers to the predominantly residential areas that surround major cities. It is close to cities but away from the center. So usually, the residents in the suburbs are employed and they travel for work because it is close to the cities, diba? An example of suburbs is a series of gated communities outside of a large city. So, here is the picture on what suburbs looks like. Ayan, ganyan siya. It is organized, diba? So, I think some of you are familiar with this. Kasi usually, ganito yung mga houses sa mga movies, diba? In suburbs, there are 4 issues that they face. These are the urban expansion, the peripheral model, suburban segregation, and transportation and suburbanization. So, we will tackle it one by one. So the first one is urban expansion. So, urban expansion is that they expanded by adding peripheral land. So, there are 4 bullets here, and here are they. The annexation, defining urban settlements, local government fragmentation, and overlapping metropolitan area. So, we will tackle it one by one. So, the first one is annexation, wherein it is a process of legally adding land area to a city. Land can be annexed to a city if majority of the residents in the affected area vote in favor of doing so. So, the residents have the power to vote or have the power to refuse, diba? It's like they have the power to disagree if, yun nga, payag ba sila doon sa pag-a-add ng land dun sa area nila or hindi. So, in 19th century, majority of residents desired annexation because the city offered services like water supply, sewage disposal, trash pickup, public transportation, and etc. But today, cities are less likely annex peripheral land because today, the residents prepare to organize their own services than pay city taxes. It's like pinapakita dito na in 19th century, parang umaasa sila to the offered services. So ngayon, parang nakarealize sila na mas okay pa lang yung tayo-tayo lang, yung mag-organize ng mga services kesa dun sa umasa tayo, dun sa ino-offer nila. It's like ganon. That's why ngayon, they are refusing to add land to their area. Kasi parang noon nasilaw lang sila to the services that they offered. So ngayon, ayun, naging independent na yung mga tao. And ginawa ding business yung mga own services nila, like water supply, diba? So here is the example of annexation. Kung nakikita nyo, it is from Boston. So, in 1795, ang liit lang ng area, diba? Ang liit lang. And then, in 1804, dumagdag yung South Boston. And in 1836, dumagdag yung sa upper, which is the East Boston. And 1855 is mas lalong lumaki, which is the Washington Village. And in 1867, palaki na ng palaki yung area nila, diba? Dumagdag yung Roxbury Bridge Island. In 1869, the Dorchester is dumagdag siya, medyo malawak. And then in 1873, the West Roxbury, Brighton, Charlestown, dumagdag yung yon. Sobrang lawak na, diba? Parang ang liit lang nung 1795, and then in 1873, sobrang lawak na. And then, in 1912, dumagdag pa itong si Hyde Park. So, ang laki ng pinagkaiba from 1795 to 1912, diba? Because of annexation, because of adding land to a area, to a specific area. Let's proceed in defining urban settlements. So, several definitions have been created to characterize cities and their suburbs. And there are usual words here. The first one is the city, the urbanized area, and the metropolitan area. The first one is city. So, it is defined as an urban settlement that has been legally incorporated into an independent and self-governing unit. It is actually an organized center of population. So, a city has locally elected officials. City has the ability to raise taxes, and it has the responsibility for providing essential services. Like Tarlac City, di ba? Tarlac City is a independent and self-governing unit. And add ko lang, no? So, Central City is a city surrounded by suburbs. Wherein, example nito is that if the Tarlac City is surrounded by suburbs, then the city is called Central City. Ayun yung tinutukoy na Central City dito. The second one is the urbanized area. So, urbanized area is the central city and the surrounding built-up suburbs. It can serve as the core of a metropolitan statistical area. And we all know that most data in some countries are collected for cities, countries, and other local government. But here in urbanized area, few statistics are only available because they don't correspond to government boundaries. The third one is the Metropolitan Statistical Area. So it is a method of measuring the functional area of a city. So actually, it is a widely used because many statistics are published for countries. So this MSA can be considered an extensive area outside the urban spectrum. MSA includes an urbanized area with a population of at least 50,000. So it means it is a functional area if it has at least 50,000 people, diba? So in MSA, it includes the country within the city is located and adjacent country with a high population density and a large percentage of residents working in the central city country. Meron ding tinatawag na micropolitan statistical area. It's like a metropolitan din pero it is the census also designated smaller urban areas wherein in micropolitan statistical area is mostly found in the south and west of the USA, and it includes 10,000 to 50,000 inhabitants. So if in metropolitan statistical area are at least 50,000 inhabitants are there, here in micropolitan statistical area, it has only 10,000 to 50,000 inhabitants. And about 10% of Americans live within these areas. So, the metropolitan and micropolitan statistical area are both known as the core-based statistical area or the CBSA. So, let's look at this figure muna. So, as you can see, it's like a map, and the red shade here is the city itself, yung nasa gitna. The city of St. Louis. And yung mustard na naka-shade are the urbanized area. While the light violet shade is the metropolitan statistical area. Kung nakikita nyo is malawak yung sakop ng metropolitan statistical area. And then, the cream shade sa baba is the micropolitan statistical area. Medyo maliit lang yung sakop niya, diba? While the green shades are the non-metropolitan areas. So, yung mga nakapalibot dito sa purple and sa cream is yun yung tinatawag nilang non-metropolitan statistical area. Let's proceed to another issue of suburbs is the local government fragmentation. So the fragmentation of local government in the US makes it difficult to solve regional problems like traffic, waste disposal, and building of affordable houses. So why? It's because the different infrastructures, businesses, and etc. are here. So it's difficult talaga to solve those problems. And also, the large numbers of local government units has led to calls for a metropolitan government that could coordinate the numerous local government in urban areas. Ayun, because of the large number of local government units, it leads to calling the attention of the metropolitan government, wherein the larger metropolitan areas have thousands of local government, which means these are widely varying levels of wealth in a specific region. So under the local government fragmentation there is dito that the overlapping metropolitan areas, wherein metropolitan areas is a region consisting of a densely populated urban core and its less populated surroundings territories, sharing industries, commercial areas, and etc. It's like the center of industries. So, for example, again, the Tarlac City. Diba, andun yung mga SM, city malls, mga famous spots like the art gallery, diba? So, the metropolitan areas leads to overlapping wherein a country between two central cities may send a large number of commuters to jobs. So, if a large metropolitan areas are so close together that they now form one continuous urban complex is called megapolis. An example of this megapolis na sinasabi dito is the extending from north of Boston to south of Washington, D.C. The next problem that the suburbs face is the peripheral model, wherein peripheral model is also known as the galactic model that created by Chauncey Harris in 1960s. Peripheral model is an urban area consists of an inner city surrounded by large suburban residential and businesses area tied together by a beltway of ring road. So in peripheral model, it has also positive impact like lack of physical, social, and economic problem of cities on the periphery or the suburban area. So here is the example of peripheral model. So nakikita nyo, merong bilog and then may numbering siya. So in center, the number 1, yung nasa gitna na naka-shade na yellow, is yun yung central city. And then yung number 2, yun yung suburban residential area sa upper part. And then number 3 is the shopping mall, wherein nakakalat siya sa bilog, diba? And then the number 4 is the industrial district, wherein nag-iisa lang siya. And then number 5 is the office work. Number 6 is the service center. And the number 7 is the airport complex, wherein nasa labas siya ng bilog. Malayo siya sa central city, diba? And then the number 8 is nag-iisa lang siya sa lower part. It is the combined employment and shopping there. So this is the peripheral model. Kung napapansin nyo, it is surrounded by different businesses or establishment, diba? So sa baba, nakikita nyo, may nakalagay na edge cities. So edge cities as around the beltway are nodes of consumer and business services. So edge cities, it is a collection of hotels and warehouses around an airport, distribution center near the junction of the beltway. And also, edge cities are the suburban residence for people who work in the central city, and then shopping malls were built to be near the residence. So, yun yung tinatawag na edge cities. Bale, doon nakatira yung mga nagtatrabaho sa central city. Code number 31, all you need to do is to comment your answer in the comment section of this video. So here is your question. Give the two choices for closing the gap between the cost of needed services and the funding available from taxes. Again, give the two choices for closing the gap between the cost of needed services and the funding available from taxes. In peripheral model, there are two problems na kinakaharap dito: the density gradient and the cost of suburban sprawl. So the first one is the density gradient. Density gradient is the density change in an urban area, and the number of houses per unit of land diminishes as distance from the inner city increase. While as you travel farther from the city, population density decreases. So there are two changes affected the density gradient in recent years. Here are they. The first one is the fewer people living in the center. So the density gradient therefore has a gap in the center where few people live. And the second changes affected the density gradient in recent year is the fewer differences in density within an urban areas, wherein the number of people living on a unit of land has decreased in the central residential areas due to population decline and abandonment of old housing. At the same time, density has increased on the periphery due to the construction of new homes and diffusions of suburbs. So here is the example of density gradients. So kung nakikita nyo na yung orange is that it stands for 15,000 and above inhabitants. And then yung medyo orange or yung orange is 10,000 to 14,999 inhabitants. And then the light orange, it has 5,000 to 9,999 inhabitants. And the yellow part is the 5,000 and below inhabitants. So in 1900s, in Cleveland, Ohio, population was highly clustered in and near the central business district. While in 1930, the population had begun to spread outward, leaving the core less dense. And then in 1960s, the upper part in the right side, outward movement had accelerated, leaving the original core as the least densely populated area of the site. And in 1990, the Cleveland, Ohio, is that the population was spread over much larger area, wherein the lowest densities were near the CBD. CBD is the Central Business District. So let's proceed to the cost of suburban sprawl, wherein suburban sprawl is a progressive spread of development of a suburban area. Yes, there's a development na nangyayari. Ang kaso, the problem is the cost kasi medyo mahal, diba? And also, suburban sprawl can cause less farmland and reduce agricultural productivity because some agricultural land may be lost through construction of isolated housing. So, yung mga land na pang-agricultural lang is nadadamay or pinatatayuan na din nila ng mga house. And it can affect the supply of local dairy products and vegetables. So, some of the countries have this legislation and regulation to limit suburban sprawl and preserve the farmland. So, yung legislation and regulation na sinasabi dito is called smart growth or smart growth. So, in US, their goal is to produce a pattern of compact and contiguous development while protecting rural land for agriculture, recreation, and wildlife. So here, they have the goal of development and at the same time, they protect the rural land. So example of this is the Maryland, wherein the smart growth here is that they prohibits the states from funding new highways and other projects that would extend suburban sprawl and destroy farmland. Let's proceed to the third challenges that the suburbs face, which is the suburban segregation. So, there are two main issues here. The first one is the residential segregation, And the second one is the suburbanization of business. So let's start. But first, what is suburban segregation muna? So, it is the action and effect of separating the population in suburban space according to socio-economic, ethnic, and cultural criteria. So actually, families with children are attracted to suburbs, which offer more space for play and protection from the high crime rates and heavy traffic characterize inner city life. So, majority, ayun nga, pinipili nila sa suburbs or suburbs. So, kasi, mas safe dito kesa dun sa inner city areas. So, the modern residential suburb is segregated in two ways. The first one is the segregated social class. So here, houses in specific suburbs are typically built for one social class, with others being excluded due to size, cost, or location. So it's like some houses are only for high class. So the low class are excluded because it might be they can't afford it, diba? While the second way is segregated land uses, wherein residents for commercial or manufacturing uses are separated from those who need compact areas. So, this way is nakabase siya if you need a land or compact area for commercial or manufacturing land. So let's proceed to the first issue in suburban segregation. It is the residential segregation, wherein large sections of the city were developed, appealing to people with similar incomes and lifestyles. So here, if you are working on an office or if you are rich, then kasama mo din is mga mayayaman, wherein wealthy families live in houses with space available in the basement or attic to accommodate servants, wherein attic or basement is the higher level of the house, the least attractive part. So in short, in resident segregation, they are segregated based on their social class. Once it is spread out over much larger areas, the old pattern of vertical separation was replaced by territorial segregation, wherein territorial segregation is a large sections of the city were developed with houses of similar interior dimensions, lot size, and cost, appealing to people with similar incomes and lifestyles. Bali, if nasa middle class ka or pare-pareho kayo ng income or lifestyles, pare-pareho lang din yung mga bahay na tinitirhan nyo, even the lot size and the cost of the house. So there is this zoning ordinances wherein it is a written regulations that say how property in specific areas can be used. So, they prevent mixing of land uses within the same district. For example, residential or commercial areas regulating lot size, placement, and height. The second issue in suburban segregation is the suburbanization of businesses, wherein businesses have moved to suburbs. Why? It can be the land is cheaper and more plentiful for business services. So manufacturers have selected peripheral locations because land costs are lower. So as I've said a while ago, it can be the land is much cheaper here. So those are the usual reason why businesses move to suburbs. Para mas lalo nating maintindihan itong suburbanization of businesses, we will tackle the suburbanization of retailing and suburbanization of factories and offices. For code number 36, again, all you need to do is to comment your answer in the comments section of this video. So here is your question. The modern residential suburb is segregated in two ways. Give these two ways. Again, the modern residential suburb is segregated in two ways. Give these two ways. So let's proceed to the suburbanization of retailing, wherein low density of residential construction discourages people from walking to stores, and restrictive zoning practices often exclude shops from residential areas. Retailing has been increasingly concentrated in planned suburban shopping malls of varying sizes, wherein corner shops have been replaced by supermarkets in small shopping centers. Larger malls contains department stores and specialty shops reserved for CBD. Generous parking lots surround the stores. So in suburbanization of retailing, those businesses are from the CBD and move in suburban areas. They move because they are all attracted by lower cost of land or taxes. And usually, large retailers are found in shopping malls or strip malls. The suburbanization of factories and offices, wherein factories and warehouse migrated to suburbs for more space, cheaper land, and better truck access. Here in suburbs, it has better truck access. It's because it is much easier to facilitate tracking shipments with less traffic congestion. And also, offices that do not require face-to-face contact are increasing, moving to suburbs where rents are lower than in the CBD. Kung mapapansin nyo, both retailing, factories, and offices are moved to suburban. It's because the rents or the cost of land is cheaper compared to CBD. But the only problem here is that it is lack of mass transit for employees to some urban or to some suburban areas. Let's proceed to the last issue in suburban segregation, which is the transportation and the suburbanization. Wherein here, people don't travel aimlessly. Their trips have a precise point of origin, destination, and purpose. So, it is true, diba? We travel because may pupuntahan tayong specific destination. It's not like drive lang tayo ng drive nang hindi natin alam kung saan tayo pupunta. So, more than half of all trips are work-related. Some are commuting for work and some has a business or deliveries like JNT, yung sa Shopee, ganun, diba? So, all of these trips produce congestion, wherein congestion is imposes cost on individuals and businesses by delaying arrival at destination, and the high concentration of slowly moving vehicles produce and increase air pollution. So, here are the usual transportation that the people use, which are the motor vehicles and the public transit. So, in motor vehicles, more than 95% of all trips are made by car, especially if your destination is far, diba? So, you will use car para hindi hassle yung biyahe. And the second one is the public transit, wherein transit traveler. So, in public transit, transit travelers take up less space, and it is cheaper, less pollutant, and more energy efficient than an automobile. So, if you will use public transit, it is much cheaper kasi magbabayad ka lang ng pamasahe. Unlike if may car ka, ipapagas pa yan. Lalo na ngayon, sobrang mahal na ng gas, di ba? So, it is suited to rapidly transport large number of people to small area in public transit. So, this is the end of my report. Thank you for listening. Hoping na meron naman kayong natutunan kahit papano.